Chapter number 3 is what determines the validity and reliability of your study. If you get it wrong in chapter number 3, then it means your research will not be viable. This is where you convince the reader or the person supposed to supervise your work that this one is doable, and there is the respondents or the people whom you are going to get the information from are people who are reliable to give information that can give insight to forming a conclusion about whatever that you're supposed to present. So that is why it is very, very important that once maybe you go to advanced studies, you'll have to present a proposal, defend that proposal before a panel, convince that panel that whatever you are going to do is within the confines of research ethics, and then it is within the law of that particular land before you execute whatever you want to do. Now, talking about law, the respondents or the way research is done from location to location normally depends. There are countries, especially the developing countries, they do not allow soliciting of information from people who are below 18 years old. So if your respondents are below 18 years old, then you have to go to court, get a court order allowing you to do that particular research on those particular respondents. Then the next of kin, normally who are parents to that particular kid, should be cognizant that you are going to solicit particular and very particular information from their children. That one, I think, to me, it sounds very haphazard. It sounds very barbaric. But now, sometimes you've got to that you are going to conduct a particular research and you want information in relation to a particular issue from their children. So these are issues that depend from state to state, country to country, and maybe continent to continent. So the first thing, 3.1, is the study design. Here you're supposed to tell us the design that your research will take. There are a number of research designs, but I'd want us to look at only one, a cross-sectional design. Here it is whereby you are looking for views of various people, a cross-sectional. Maybe your population is maybe 5 million people, and you are taking views from maybe 3% of that particular population, and you justified that the sample population that you have chosen is representative of the whole audience. So what we consider at the moment is representativeness and not a particular percentage of the people. You can maybe have a population of 5 million people, and your sample size is just 10 people, and those 10 people will represent those people very, very well. At the same time, you can have a population of 5 million people, then you choose a sample size of 1 million people, and they do not represent the views of the people that you have chosen per se. So it is very, very important that I think we shall look at that one about the sampling procedure later on. It is very, very important that you look at your respondents and how representative are they to the population that they represent. The same applies to when you are choosing a geographical location. For example, if you come from Nigeria and then you want to take a sample from a place like Enugu. Enugu might not be representative of the whole of Nigeria, but if you take the capital city of Nigeria, then it will be more representative as compared to just a small location within Nigeria. So it is very, very important that you consider representativeness. Back to our study design. So Most of our studies will take a cross-sectional study design. That is whereby you want to study a particular issue from a number of respondents who are representative of the whole population, and you want to look at it over some period of time. The other ones that I've already put there, that is the quasi-experimental design. This is one whereby you have an experiment, you're doing an experiment in a laboratory setup, or it is something very practical that you're doing an experiment, then you cover it up with secondary data. Then observational design has its own criticism in that it might be prone to personal biases, but at times you can be able to use it. For example, when you are doing a laboratory study, and then maybe you see that there is a color change, there is litmus change from maybe blue to black. There is no way you can be able to change that, because black is black and blue it is blue. So observational design sometimes has its own bottlenecks, but sometimes it is used, and mostly when you have experiments. And the first one is a classical experimental design. I think you can get it from the name as it goes. So most of the studies that you will take, because maybe you'll have respondents who are going to give you data, then they're going to take a cross-sectional design. Then the study site is U 3.2. Remember, chapter number 1, we talked of geographical scope. And you will say that I'm choosing Amsterdam because of proximity, or this is where the research problem is based. Now, in the research site, if you are taking your study in Nigeria again, you will have to give us this, the population of Nigeria. Then if you are using, for example, Enugu in Nigeria, tell us the population of Enugu, and just reiterate whatever you said in chapter number 1, why you chose that particular area. It is very, very important that you give us the population of that particular area. But I have issues here with our brothers who might be coming from South Sudan. I'm told South Sudan, the last time they had census was in 2007. So it is very hard for you who's doing your study maybe in Juba, maybe in Jonglei, to give us a specific population of that particular place, because if that thing was done in 2007, I think that is about 13 years to date. So the population that was gotten from the census as at that particular time might not be reflective of whatever that is happening to date. So get the information very appropriate. Then if you are doing, for example, a study in a particular NGO, for example, you are doing it in UNHCR, then it is based maybe in Nigeria again. So let us have the population of the number of people who are working within UNHCR in Nigeria. Then if it is based within the capital city of Nigeria, give us the beneficiaries, the direct people whom this thing will affect. So it is very, very important that you indicate the research site. And then it is also important that you have a map of your study area, and this one can be included in the appendices section, what we shall talk about, I think, the last thing for today. After you research your study site, you have the research approach. Here it is where I'd want us to have our attention on. We have 3 types of research approaches. The first one is quantitative, the next one is qualitative, and the last one is mixed approaches. And I'd want to explain the first 2. The last one is just self-explanatory. When you want to take a quantitative study, then you are invoking the issue of statistics into your work. First thing, you have to tell us how you got your respondents. And most of the time, it has got to be through stratified sampling. For example, you are doing a research study in an organization, and then you want 10% of the population within that organization to be your respondents. Then you stratify that one out. You divide the different departments into different stratas. So if it is the monitoring and evaluation department, it will give maybe you 5 respondents. Then the accounts department, another 5 respondents or 2. The management will give you 1, and such. This is done for matters of ensuring that every department is representative. On another level, you might be doing something that is concerned with monitoring and evaluation in an organization, and you look at the different departments you have, and you see that there are departments which might be irrelevant. For example, you are doing you are talking about the issue of monitoring and evaluation in correlation to project implementation or execution. And then you are going to interview people who are maybe from the communications and public relations department. It might that is very irrelevant of you. So it is better off that you stratify your population so that you get information from people who are relevant. The respondents should be very relevant. However, how few they are, they should be very relevant with relevant information. Back to what we were explaining. So in quantitative studies, you normally take a percentage that is 0.05 of the whole population, but it can be higher if your population is more than less than not more than but less than 100 people. There is an equation for getting a representative sample, and then the population, you will give it questionnaires. For quantitative studies, you give out questionnaires. The questionnaires can be physical paper, it can be through an email, it can be through a link. Maybe you've created a survey monkey. I think, and it can be through WhatsApp or through Skype. But it has specific questions which the respondent will respond to, and then you get data. In the context of collecting quantitative data, there is no asking of, if you were to get to people who do not know maybe to write and you want to collect information from them, you pose the question, they tell you the answer, you write it down the way they tell you. No more probing, no more questioning. From there, you just ask the questions the way they are in the questionnaire. And then a questionnaire can have closed-ended questions and open-ended questions. Closed-ended questions are those questions whereby you either have multiple choice or you are limited in terms of the answers that you give. You are to give particular answers, either yes or no or something like that. And then for open-ended questions, at least the respondent gives an explanation as to why maybe he or she has responded in a particular manner. And then after you have collected the data, there is a data cleanup, and then the data is presented quantitatively through use of Excel or through use of SPSS. And it will be presented in terms of percentages, graphs, and even tables. So you ask a question, a particular audience will tell you yes or no, and then you make a conclusion from there. On the other hand, qualitative studies take now a different approach. First, the way you get your respondents, the people who are going to be your sample size, is different from quantitative. We said quantitative normally use stratified sampling. For qualitative, we use purposive sampling. Purposive sampling sometimes is known as judgmental sampling. This is whereby you come up with a small number of respondents who are representative of the whole audience, and you are going to interview them. You are going to ask them questions. They respond to you. If you ask, for example, the first question, what is the importance of monitoring and evaluation in project management? So respondent A will tell you maybe 5 points. Then you juxtapose the same question to respondent number B. Then if there is something that you know respondent A told you and it has not been said by respondent B, you ask the same question. Does it apply that maybe monitoring and evaluation adds to issues of accountability in terms of a project implementation? Then that person will explain. Then your respondents are at a position to explain everything or every information that they give to you, which is not a case to quantitative. Quantitative, normally you take a bigger sample size, but for qualitative, you can take as few as 3 respondents, 1, 2, 3. Then the information gotten normally is also cleaned, and then it is presented through thematic analysis. So if normally information is presented in line to your specific objectives. So if your specific objective number 1 was maybe to find out the importance of having a monitoring and evaluation department within an organization, then you ask that particular question to your respondents. Then when you are presenting your data, 4.12 should be importance of monitoring and evaluation departments. When I post this question to respondent A, this is what he told me, and then you write in direct quotation, no changing of words, exactly whatever that person told you. Then as you discuss down, you tell the reader that this is the information I got from respondent A. Respondent B, however, was of a different opinion. And then maybe respondent C and D corroborated what was there for what respondent A said. Then in your discussion chapter, that is now chapter number 5, you will give your personal opinion on what the respondents told you vis-a-vis the data, the literature, that you reviewed. I think we shall get to there. So the way that quantitative data is collected and the qualitative data is collected is different. The way it is analyzed, it is different. And the way it is presented, it is different. There is another second way of collecting qualitative data. The first one we have said it is through interviews. The second one is through focus group discussions. And this one normally happens like the cases when you have TV shows, a show on a TV. Then maybe you have a presidential aspirant A and another presidential aspirant B. So you ask the same question that you ask to presidential aspirant 1 is the same question that you ask the other respondent B. And then you based on the information that you get, you can record that, and then you can go replay and replay again and be able to at least come up with the data from there and be able to give a conclusion. So qualitative data can be collected either through interviews or through focus group discussions. And this is very important. I think focus group discussions are an important source of data. For example, if you are looking for information from your organization or the organization that you are working for, then you ask them to come for something like a meeting, so that they are on the other side and you are on this side of the table. Whatever you ask the manager is whatever that you ask the monitoring and evaluation department person. It's whatever you ask the auditor, and they'll give you different views on whatever they think about that particular issue, and that will form impetus into the conclusion that will come up. Then on another level, you'd want to do triangulation. That is, you take a mixed research approach so that the information you get from the questionnaires, you juxtapose that particular information to the people whom you will interview or the people that you'll have a focused group discussion with. And that is a mixed research approach. And in this case, your information will be represented through graphs, through tables, through percentages, and through thematic analysis and the narration of whatever that happened. So it is very, very important, Jolie, it is very, very important that you have a difference between quantitative, qualitative, and mixed approaches. Data needs, types, and sources. There are basically two types of data sources. In fact, your research approach, your research approach sometimes determines the types of data that you may be able to need, as well as your objectives of study. Now, there are two types of data sources. The first one is primary data, and the second one is secondary data. Primary data is the one that you go out to the field and you collect by yourself. It is data that has not been analyzed or has not been collected by any other person. So you are the first person to collect it. You can either go in person to collect it, or you can employ research assistants. But at this stage, I will not advocate for the same, because this is a study that is being conducted for purposes of learning only, or else you'd want to maybe use it somewhere else, or maybe it is your immediate supervisor or an organization that has told you to do the same. But let's just keep to a smaller number, a very small number of respondents. Do the data collection, analysis, and presentation by yourself, so that you can be able to gain confidence in doing these things. And that is the basic thing why we brought in this particular module. So primary data is from either questionnaires or interviews or focus group discussions. That is primary. Then there are studies, normally, like when you are looking at issues of project management within organizations. There are organizations which collecting information, that is raw data from them, might be a problem. You go to the manager tells you, I'm not authorized to speak to you. You go to the maybe communications personnel, then you get all manner of flimsy excuses, more especially from the third world countries. And when they know that this information is for issues that will bring in accountability issues, it will be very hard for you to get such information. So in such scenarios, it can force you to resort to secondary sources of data. The secondary sources of data is data which has already been published, data which is in the public domain. For example, if you are looking for data in relation to project execution, the way a particular project was executed. For example, if this period of COVID-19, then different countries have had different kitties for handling of the COVID-19 issue. and then you'd want to find data on how money has been handled, then I think the best thing to do is not to talk to anyone. Just look for records, see the way money has been spent. And because this is a class, we've got to be sincere with each other. I have seen some cases in some countries whereby just a face mask, has been sold maybe to the government to a tune of about 10 euros or something like that. And later on, when the cases of COVID-19 came down, then the mask is costing less than €1. So you can't just understand why this thing has got to happen to some governments in some developing nations, and you wonder how some of the small nations will benefit. And this is for learning purposes only. We are not here to criticize any other particular country, but it is okay when we call a spade, when we call corruption in very broad terms. So there are scenarios that you may look for respondents and you may not get one. I have a scenario in my mind. There is a friend of mine who was looking for information in Uganda on the LGBTI community. He didn't find any. But if you go to Uganda and you look for people who are of that particular line, people of the LGBTI community, I think there should be a number. But the way the country, maybe the moral values of that particular country revere this particular issue, that thing, there might be someone who's suffering, but will never talk about it boldly, because issues of such vehemence or issues of such orientation, sexual orientation, are a very revered thing in Uganda. In Uganda, I'm even told for those who are not for the opposite sex marriage, you cannot do it publicly. You'll be stoned to death. And I'm not very certain of the same thing, but maybe Chinelo will tell us about the same thing. But so you look at the scenarios before you. Will you be able to get respondents to give you valuable data that can form impetus to a conclusion, data that will be valid, data that at least you will say, this is valuable data for this particular issue. If you do not have, then go for secondary data. Secondary data can also be gotten from the mainstream media. You can look at maybe the news that has been happening in that particular country, and where you suspect that you may brush the authorities in the wrong way, then just look for secondary data, publish your data. I think at this stage I'd want maybe to allow maybe one or two people to ask or add minors, or maybe say whatever thing that you'd want to say about the presentation before we proceed to the remaining issues, that is population sampling procedure, data collection, data analysis, validity and reliability, and ethics. That is for chapter number 3. So if we have another person who has an issue to add or minus, I think we will give you the floor.